Let's just dive right into this, shall we? Game one of the Suns T-Wolves series. Where do you start?
To be consistent from where I was last week going into the game, I'll start with, I think we all knew Anthony Edwards was going to go off at some point. I was hoping it wouldn't be in game one. I was hoping the Suns could delay that as long as they could. You know what I mean? Because for whatever reason, you had held him to base, 14 points a game in the first three meetings.
Yes.
You knew he was going to go off. He's too good. But I was hoping you could hold that to like game two or game three and maybe, pick up a couple wins here early. And now that's, at least in game one, that's out the window.
Yeah,
and I think he's up now.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, right now, that's probably a good place to start for a lot of people that are out there. But for me right now, it was the physicality of the game. That is where I've got to start right now. The referees let both teams know right from the tip that this was going to be a physical series, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've been watching the postseason period right now. Have you noticed, though? It's pretty consistent in regard to being more physical. We all know the postseason, of course, gets more physical. We all know that. But it seems like there's a consistency that is here with how these games are being officiated that I think we're going to see a very, very physical postseason, not just with the Suns and the T-Wolves, but across the NBA.
As long as they're consistent with it, I can get on board with that. But I don't know that that's great for the Suns against this particular opponent. I mean, we talked so much last week about how of the three teams you might realistically play, with Denver and Oklahoma City being the other two, Minnesota was probably the best matchup, and I still feel that way. But if they're going to be allowed to be physical, that's how they want to play. And so the Suns are going to – there's one thing they have to adjust mid-series to an adjustment the other team makes. I don't know how the Suns are going to completely overhaul how they play if Minnesota is going to be that physical.
Yeah, no, I know. Just watching it, it was really difficult because the Suns came out. They came out and they were ready to go. They matched that physicality in that first quarter. They did. They played really, really well. I thought they played really, really hard. I thought their intensity level was there. And then all of a sudden, after that first quarter, they actually had a lead, 28-27, I believe, if memory serves. They had the lead. And from that point, for the rest of the game, the next three quarters, it seemed like they faded in terms of physicality.
Yeah.
They faded from that point on. And, it wasn't something dramatic. It just was an act of attrition over the next three quarters.
I told you this in the pre-show meeting. The way it felt and the way it has felt this season is like you take your phone, but your phone's a little bit older, and you can tell you're going to need a new phone at some point.
Yeah.
You charge it, it's 100%. But then it just rapidly drops off as the day goes on. And that's
a great analogy.
It's what the Suns felt like on Saturday, and they felt like that at different times this season. It's like, okay, we're here. But as the game starts to wear, especially in the second and third quarters on Saturday, it was just they could not match Minnesota in that regard. It's one game out of seven.
It's one.
We've seen them fall behind. I'm trying to pull up all the numbers on this. We saw them fall behind in the first round against the Clippers last year and then win the next four games. But in general, in this era, since they started making it back to the playoffs, once they fall behind in a series, they haven't responded real well. So this is a big game, obviously, tomorrow.
Yeah, once again, we were talking about this very thing. Who has more to lose going into this game? And I thought it was the Timberwolves had more to lose going into this game. Stop and think about it once again. If they lose this game to the Suns, now all of a sudden they've lost 4 consecutive games in a row. Every time they played the Suns, the last 4 times, they lost. And now all of a sudden, here you are in the postseason. You're making vows under moon, sun, and sky as to what you're going to do and how you're going to play. And you go out game one of the series and lose home court advantage immediately. They had a lot riding on this game, the T-Wolves.
Yeah.
What a bummer it would be for them collectively as a team if they would have lost game one. And that would have really damaged their confidence. I don't care what anybody says.
That was a reminder. Watching that game was a reminder of why the Suns could not be in the play-in tournament, because they could go out there and have a game like that and just be done. You know what I mean? At least now they have a best-of-7 series. They have time to adjust. Not a ton of time, but they have time to respond. Minnesota, though, to your point, really just kind of erase the entire regular season with that. I mean, would you rather be the team that was 3-0 in the regular season or the team that's 1-0 in the series? You'd much rather be Minnesota right now. And so, like to your point, if the Suns go out and just continue what we saw in the regular season, then it's kind of like, okay, they just own this team going into Game 2. Now, if you're Minnesota, you're like, who cares what they did? And we're up 1-0 in the playoffs.
Yeah, and for me, Basinonians, it was the how. It was the physicality. That's what really stood out to me. It was the how the T-Wolves and their physicality unfolded over the course of that game. The T-Wolves out-rebounded the Suns 28-52. 52-28 is a better way of saying that. 52-28.
There's no good way of saying that.
Okay?
That's horrible.
The T-Wolves were plus 10 on the offensive glass. Plus 10. Plus 18 in the paint. They had a 20-6 edge in second chance points. I mean, that was it right there. That's the kind of physicality they brought to the floor. And that's what the Suns needed to do.
Here's Kevin Durant on the physicality.
Yeah, I do. And I think sometimes we might have fouled too much there at bad times, trying to be physical. But we'll figure it out. The rest of letting us play, and it's the type of game we want.
That's why I go back to what I was just saying before. Just be consistent. Now you've kind of set a tone in this first game because the Suns, and I sort of understand where they're coming on some of these. They're trying to play physical, and the way that question was asked to Kevin Durant is, does he feel the Suns match the T-Wolves' physicality early, which is why he said, yeah, I do. But they also got into some foul issues doing it. If the Suns now are able to pull this off and kind of adjust for Game 2 and, hey, they're going to call it this way and we're going to be more physical, and then the officials are completely different in Game 2 with the way they call it, that's where you really have problems. So even if a more physical series is an advantage for the Timberwolves, I just want it to be called consistently now going forward because the Suns' season may hinge on that because right now they're trying to adjust with the way it was officiated in Game 1.
Yeah, to your point right there, Devin Booker actually said, quote, "We all just need to adjust to the playoff physicality. They're being ultra physical with me, and I had 3 early fouls. Just trying to find a rhythm from there," end quote, said Book. To your point.
This is the downside of the NBA, and it's just basketball in general, I guess. But, like, in hockey, it's a different style of play in the playoffs, but everybody knows how it's going to be called. Baseball, they don't like suddenly shrink the strike zone in the playoffs, and everybody knows we're going to move it just slightly over to one side.
Yeah,
that's football. It's not like they suddenly just consciously decide to call games differently. NBA officials can affect the series. I'm not saying that's why the Suns lost on Saturday, but I'm saying now going forward, it's got to be called that way because the Suns are trying to calibrate the way they play to how the officials are calling the game.
Yeah, and I think so much of the time right there, I don't think fans really want to see a lot of whistles being blown.
I don't.
I know. I feel exactly the same way, and not only that, I think it's a situation where you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, do we want these guys to go out there and shoot free throws the entire game or not? And I also think they don't want guys like Devin Booker and Kevin Durant fouling out or being in foul trouble in the postseason because they've got a quick whistle. It makes a lot of sense to me. They want their ratings to go up, not down.
Yeah, but everything you just said, I agree with. But if Devin Booker or Kevin Durant's walking around with 5 fouls in the fourth quarter on Tuesday and there's some ticky-tack fouls in there, we're all going to be losing our minds.
Thanks for watching Wolf and Luke. Tap to see more and click the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.